think everything's good to go. So, hello world, my name is Miles, and I'm a graduate student at Michigan State University in the United States. In my free time, I like to try to learn the latest scientific discoveries by browsing the websites of top scientific journals. If this is your first time seeing a video of mine, please take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow my Twitch channel at Miles Does Science. It's the same name for both channels. It's free, easy, and you can always unsubscribe later if you want. So today we'll be looking at kind of keeping with yesterday's theme of climate change. We'll be looking at a couple of other climate change related papers. I saw this one just a little bit ago. It was published a few days ago. Today's the 13th of September, and this was published, I guess, just a little over a week ago on the 4th of September. And kind of just glancing at the abstract or summary here, this paper is about combining strategies to halt both the crisis of biodiversity loss and climate change on planet Earth. Oftentimes it seems that these two objectives are talked about separately, but really they are very closely interconnected. Reversing climate change in large part will only come about by also reversing biodiversity loss. So let's see if we can get just a little bit of background on biodiversity loss crisis. It's not talked about as much in the media as climate change is, but it's generally well accepted among scientists that many species are going extinct around the world at rates that far exceed what we would expect as a sort of background rate, and that's it's largely, these increased rates of extinction are largely attributed to human activities, as one might imagine. I was hoping to find like an interesting graph on the Wikipedia page showing some kind of decline in biodiversity loss. But, oh yeah, here we go. Let's click on this. Oh, I figured it didn't pop up. But anyway, here, we'll just look at this one instead. So it looks like this is just showing where most species of plants and animals on Earth occur, looks like. And each of these areas are heavily threatened by habitat degradation, such as rainforests in the equator, tropical regions especially, islands, and so on. So this paper talks about, so it looks like it identifies regions of land that, if properly protected, that will help reverse both biodiversity loss and climate change. So that's pretty interesting. And of course they have some nice global maps to help kick things off. Let's go ahead and get some nice big images of these. Okay, so looks like they're showing current protected areas in dark green, and then different types of unprotected areas in these other colors, shades of green, purple, and blue. So yeah, looks like honestly there's more green than I would have expected. Let's see here. What are these different types of unprotected areas? needed to conserve species rarity, sites to conserve distinct species assemblages, sites to conserve rare phenomena, and sites to conserve intactness, and then wildlife and climate corridors. So it looks like these slightly darker blue areas are needed to help make sure that habitats are cohesive and not fragmented. Habitat fragmentation is another large driver of biodiversity loss on Earth. I wonder what they define as rare phenomena here. That could be interesting. But the fact is that none of these other types of shade of land are currently protected. It's fascinating. There's larger parts of Canada that are unprotected than I would have expected. And climate stabilization areas make up a smaller percentage than I would have expected. Seems like it'd be interesting to apply this approach to the oceans as well. I mean, here they're just looking at what parts of land need to be conserved, but I don't know, most of the Earth is covered in water after all, so it'd be interesting if they applied a similar approach to see what remaining areas of ocean need to be protected in order to reverse climate change. Or maybe not reverse climate change, but some other objective perhaps. So let's see here. Next figure. Another beautiful map. And again, we have these global protected areas in green, and then let's see here. So is this? I think this is trying to show overlap between biodiversity conservation areas and areas that store carbon, I think. Median total carbon density of unprotected areas selected to enhance biodiversity conservation and carbon storage. Okay, so those are the dark blue and light blue areas. Pretty much have to conserve all of Russia. It's just one big swath of blue, and all of Australia as well, which is interesting, except for these little bits of coast, which I think are the most heavily populated areas. It'd be interesting to have to like overlay this map with population densities as well, although that would be a lot of colors on one map. But be interesting, see if the lands that need protecting have any overlap with lands that are currently being developed, which I'm sure they are. I'm sure there's plenty of overlap there. I'm going to look back at this figure real quick because I had another interesting question. Yeah, there are fewer areas. I mean, not much of Madagascar is highlighted as needing more protected areas, which I find pretty interesting because Madagascar is like one of the most unique locations on Earth in terms of biodiversity. It has an incredibly high number of endemic species, or in other words, species that don't occur anywhere else on the planet. Interesting that there's not more highlighted there. I think it's funny how like these protected areas, I think some of these protected areas are just, I think they're protected partly because people don't use them that often, such as like these areas near the North Pole. So, but they don't have, I guess, much economic benefit so people don't bother developing them, and then we just call them protected areas. Oh, I guess I don't know that much about. Actually, I hardly know anything at all about what goes on up in the North Pole. So I'm likely wrong there. Let's see here. Final figure number 3. Looks like focusing on just a couple continents now. South America, North America, Africa, and Asia. The same different categories of unprotected versus protected areas. Not sure what these percentages are, because these don't add up to 100%. Is this like percent of the Earth's surface? Maybe? Could be. But yeah, it seems like same old story. We need to protect more of the Amazon and more of these interesting regions at northerly latitudes that have rare phenomena. Pretty cool. So I guess I wonder how big of an effort it would be to protect all of these areas. It doesn't seem like that much. Doesn't seem like that much, but I don't know. Perhaps a lot of these regions also overlap with important agricultural regions, and so there could be some conflicts there. That's pretty interesting, though. I'd be curious to know, like, just how feasible it is to preserve all of that land and how quickly it could work. Like, if we protected all of that land starting tomorrow, how would we not face the worst parts of climate change in the next 50 years or so? Are we already doomed? I don't really know. But it's very promising, kind of uplifting. Like it seemed, I don't know that much about global politics, obviously, and it would obviously be a huge undertaking, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible to both reverse biodiversity loss and stabilize the Earth's climate. The evidence just shows that we need to all band together and get it done. All right. So moving on to a different topic, although I guess has a little bit to do with climate change because we're talking about hurricanes here. But I thought this paper would be interesting because it deals with both politics and responses to climate change events such as worsening hurricane seasons. And it seems like here they're talking about how mistrust of scientific evidence is increasingly correlated with one's political affiliation. So whether or not you believe in climate change, vaccines, and COVID-19 risks tends to fall along party lines. So it looks like conservative media tend to be more dismissive of scientific evidence. And all this relates to how conservative versus liberal districts responded to Hurricane Irma back in 2017, I think. Okay, so individuals that voted for President Trump were like 11% less likely to evacuate than individuals that voted for Hillary Clinton, and that was consistent with, and that finding was consistent even when the authors controlled for the location of where these Clinton and Trump voters were living. Interesting. Let's see what the figures show. You don't have to believe the abstract, though. You can look at the figures. Oh, whoops. I want to open a new tab. There we go. Let's see. So colors represent the proportion of residents who evacuated 24 hours before 3 different hurricanes, Matthew, Harvey, and Irma. It's like looking at in Florida and Texas. So yeah, the darker blue colors respond to a higher frequency of evacuation, and the lighter colors respond to lower frequencies of evacuation. So as you might expect, areas towards the coast had higher rates of evacuation. It's interesting, or I guess that's as you'd expect. Both in the case of Hurricane Harvey in Texas and Hurricane Irma in Florida. I like how there's just this one district. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's just this one district in Florida during Hurricane Irma that is close to the coast but didn't evacuate at all. So they're just going their own way. In the midst of all that blue, there's just one district that's stubborn and doesn't want to evacuate. And it looks like we're gonna look at correlations between these evacuation rates and who people in those districts voted for. So here we have the probability of someone being evacuated by a given day of October 1st through October 8th. As time goes on, the probability that an individual has evacuated goes up, which makes sense, as more people are evacuating over time. You can see that in the case of Hurricane Matthew, Trump and Clinton voters had very similar probabilities of being evacuating, which is not that surprising. Same for Hurricane Harvey. About a year later, Clinton and Trump voters had similar probabilities of evacuating. But in Hurricane Irma, only like a month later, there's a huge difference in whether or not Trump voter precincts or Clinton voter precincts evacuated. You can see that. Let's see here. Here they show like a 5 percentage point difference by September 11th. Looks like Trump voters only had a 35% probability of being evacuated by that point, whereas Clinton voters had a 40% probability of being evacuated. And then they just marked day 5 here as Limbaugh. What does that mean? Is that Rush Limbaugh's birthday or something? Probably some political event a couple years ago that I don't recall. It doesn't say in the caption what that day, September 5th, marked Limbaugh means. Surprised they call these Kaplan-Meier curves. It just seems just more like a cumulative probability distribution. Maybe that's just Kaplan-Meier is just a fancy name for that. see, how am I doing on time? Doing all right. Look at these other two. Oh man, other 3 figures and call it a day. So zooming in on just Hurricane Irma, can see the effect of whether or not a precinct got a warning about hurricane and whether or not a precinct predominantly voted for Trump or Clinton. Be interesting to know how they defined a Trump precinct and how they defined a Clinton precinct. They can see that precincts that did not get a warning were overall less likely to evacuate than precincts that did get a warning, but there's like a fixed effect of whether or not a precinct predominantly voted for Clinton or Trump as well. In both cases, precincts that mostly voted for Clinton were more likely to evacuate. And that trend still holds if you break up, instead of this binary classification of whether or not a precinct voted for Clinton or voted for Trump, you can split this spectrum into more categories, 10 in this case instead of 2. You still see that trend of mostly Trump voting precincts having lower probabilities of evacuating than mostly Clinton voting precincts. And again, we have this Limbaugh day. I'm not sure what that refers to. I'm not super big into politics. I just thought this paper would be interesting to cover because it concerns science denialism and in the context of climate change a little bit, which I've been thinking a lot about lately. I thought it'd be good to, and those are both kind of topics we hear about in the media quite a lot. And what we hear tends to follow along party lines. I thought it'd be interesting to look at what the data says about those things, like what the unbiased scientists have to say about it. Let's see here. So I guess these Limbaugh dates are referring to some statement that Rush Limbaugh made. I don't know what statement they're referring to. Let's see if we can figure that out. Limbaugh. I'm trying to search the page for Limbaugh right now, but my computer is throwing a fit. My computer gave me a black screen yesterday. I couldn't click on anything. I was so worried that my laptop had finally gone kaput. I really need to get a new laptop soon though. So let's see here. Okay, so they're referring to a statement that Rush Limbaugh made when he questioned the severity of Hurricane Irma and the motivation behind government advisories. Let's see here. Rush Limbaugh said there is a desire to advocate this climate change agenda, and hurricanes are one of the fastest and best ways to do it. Interesting how think of climate change as some kind of agenda that someone's trying to accomplish, whereas it's actually a catastrophe that we're trying to avoid. See, Rush Limbaugh then goes on to say, all you need is to create the fear and panic accompanied by talk that climate change is causing hurricanes to become more frequent and bigger and more dangerous. Well, it's not just talk, man. That's the science, as we've been trying to see, and it's mission accomplished. TV stations begin reporting this, and the panic begins to increase. It's probably because they should be panicked. We should be panicked about climate change. There's no question about that, really. So the media benefits with the panic, with increased eyeballs, and the retailers benefit from the panic with increased sales. That's an interesting. I don't know whether you'd call that a interesting theory about climate change that I haven't heard before. That climate change is is somehow meant to, like, it's a ploy to benefit media and retailers. I guess the idea is that people that we scare people with talk about climate change, so they tune into media more often and they buy emergency supplies from retailers. But like, I don't know why you'd ever go that route. Like, if you're some kind of advertising firm or you're a business trying to increase sales, I feel like there are far more effective ways to sell your products, Instead of pushing some scary doomsday event called climate change, why not just, I don't know, pay Kim Kardashian to say, to hold your product and say that she loves it? I feel like one of those is far more effective than the other. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems convoluted to drum up some a huge doomsday just to increase sales. I don't know. And okay, so let's finish Rush Limbaugh's statement. You have people in all of these government areas who believe man is causing climate change, and they're hell-bent on providing it. These storms, once they actually hit, are never as strong as they're reported. How strong was Hurricane Irma? Let's see here. Let's see. Let's try to not bias the search. I'll just go to the Wikipedia page. You have to be a little careful with the kind of politicized topics. Wikipedia, I think, is generally a good source or a good place to get general knowledge on a topic, as long as the topic you're investigating is not politicized somehow. And if this topic has been politicized, it may be, the information on the page may be a little less reliable, so you gotta be a little more skeptical. Generally, any pages to do with like biology and genetics and math are pretty good. But if you're looking at like history or looking at pages of political figures, that's a whole other story. So let's see. Irma caused widespread and catastrophic damage throughout its lifetime, particularly in the northeastern Caribbean and Florida Keys. It was the most intense hurricane to strike the continental United States since Katrina in 2005. Whoa. The first major hurricane to make landfall in Florida was Wilma in the same year, and the first Category 4 hurricane to strike the state since Charley in 2004. The word Armageddon was coined soon after the hurricane to describe the damage caused by the hurricane. I'd never heard the term Armageddon. Let's see here. Okay, so that was a report from a Miami newspaper on the damage caused by the hurricane. Interesting. Although they don't have any like raw data on how much damage Hurricane Irma caused. They just have a statement saying that it was pretty bad. Which wouldn't be surprising considering that it was a Category 5 hurricane. Rush Limbaugh was obviously very skeptical about that. I'm all for having a healthy dose of skepticism on these things, but what I'm not for is just outright denying evidence. So anyway, that's what these dates are referring to. Alright, I think there's like one more figure and then we'll call it good. Or no, two more figures. Oh, lovely dot plot. So here on the y-axis we have the Trump-Limbaugh coefficient. I don't know why that just sounds funny to me. Be wonderful if that was like some kind of mathematics term, or I don't know, something that generalized beyond this context. It was like a foundation in its own field of science, studies of the Trump-Limbaugh coefficient. So looks like these different effects of geography perhaps, and then evacuation within 24 versus 48 hours. See here, need a little bit more information on what those mean. Main coefficient estimates, 95% confidence interval for varying geo-hash fixed effects, assuming residents evacuate from their homes for more than 24 or 48 hours. Okay, so I think they're varying location here on the x-axis. Different locations in Florida or Texas perhaps. And then showing the Trump-Limbaugh coefficient across either 24 or 48 hour intervals. And in all cases it's negative. Kind of confusing here how they have zero. The y-axis here starts at 0, but as you go up you get to more negative values instead of more positive values, which is a little confusing. Not entirely sure I understand that figure, but let's go on to the next one. Okay, so now we have, now we're comparing Google Trends of Rush Limbaugh hurricane searches and the difference in cumulative evacuations of Clinton versus Trump precincts. So Clinton precincts overall evacuated more than the Trump precincts during Hurricane Irma, so you subtract the two and you still get a positive value. It's just showing as more people started evacuating, more people also started to Google Rush Limbaugh hurricane. Pretty interesting. Not sure what these Google Trends are measuring, how they're normalized. I assume it's some count of the number of times Rush Limbaugh hurricane was searched. I don't know, perhaps normalized by time or something. I don't know. And this is when Rush Limbaugh made his statement. He's made a statement. I'm surprised that they seem to have some people were already Googling the terms Rush Limbaugh hurricane before the 5th. Oh wait, no, that's not what it's showing. Never mind. They're just interpolating a straight line here between these two data points. That's my bad. No one was Googling Rush Limbaugh hurricane before he made his statement. Perhaps there's some kind of meme of Rush Limbaugh with his face on a hurricane, and and maybe that's what I thought people were Googling. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, so yeah, no need to deny science. It's there to help us and keep us safe. And there are a lot of smart people out there working on the hardest problems of our time, and hopefully they can save us from the messes that we repeatedly get ourselves stuck in. That's the uplifting message for today. So if you made it this far through the video, thank you very much for watching. I plan to keep streaming every Saturday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm also toying around with the idea of streaming around um, Wednesday afternoon, perhaps, maybe around like 3 o'clock or something like that. I have to look at my schedule and figure it out, but it's in the works. Um, Also in the pipeline, I'm thinking about doing some coding tutorial or doing some kind of tutorials for programming languages like R and Python and bioinformatics and genetics, just to get more of my training and expertise out there into the world and maybe help some people along the way. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and have a good rest of your day.